Russia confirms the successful firing of its new hypersonic missile. Putin claims it's invincible.
Russia's defense ministry announced 2 of its nuclear-capable strategic bombers arrived in Venezuela this week.
The Venezuelan crisis has entered a new phase.
If Russia continues talks about these undetectable missiles, China will likely feel threatened.
It's been reported that China has up to 300 nuclear warheads.
The CIA strongly believes North Korea has accumulated enough nuclear material to create 1 or possibly 2 weapons.
So, question will always be, with what lens are you watching the news? Let's say you just got home from work, you get through the door, you turn on the TV, and that's what you see. What would you assume is the most major threat on the world stage? Anybody, just call it out, you don't have to raise your hand.
Definitely Russia.
Definitely Russia. That's confident, I like it. Who says Russia? Anybody agree with her? Hands? Okay, great. Who else?
China.
Stop yelling at me, but China is a good answer. Anybody? Who else? China?
North Korea?
North Korea. Any North Korea takers? And Venezuela? Anybody? No? Oh, yeah. One guy in the back. A little worried about Venezuela. Everybody's cool with Venezuela? No threat? Okay. Let me ask you this. Which one of these places can claim to have the largest oil deposit on the planet? More than Saudi? More than Iran? Wow. Okay. What about things like gold? More than all the mines in Africa combined? The fact is that Venezuela is arguably the single greatest resource of oil and minerals on the planet. So, why is this country in the midst of one of the greatest humanitarian crises in modern history? Let's meet President Nicolas Reyes. After rising to power on a wave of nationalist pride, in a mere 6 years, this guy has crippled the national economy by half. He has raised the poverty rate by almost 400%. Luckily for the rest of us, he's up for re-election. So, who's running against him? This is Gloria Bonalde. Now, Gloria is a history professor turned activist. She's running against him on a social justice platform and on the strength of, in my humble opinion, just not being an asshole. Analyst predictions, as of today, have the chances of Venezuela's total economic collapse at 87%. On the news, they'll call it a crisis. But on the world stage, they'll call it a failed state. If you've never heard that term, other examples of a failed state in recent history are Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. And if that's not bad enough news for you, well, Venezuela is also the only one of these places within 30-minute range from the US of next-gen nuclear missiles. You will not hear about any of this on the news because the biggest players on the world stage do not want you to. To them, unstable governments are nothing more than the greatest of opportunities. So, Russia, China, can never be the most major threat until countries like Venezuela leave the door open to our very own backyard.
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.
What do you all think that is? I guarantee you have no idea what it means.
It means he's Mr. Rabbit.
He created a flu that sparked the demand for a vaccine that doesn't work. After everyone in the country is vaccinated.
And the world?
He'll have murdered millions.
Nope, you don't have it. I've done so many terrible, terrible things in my life. Horrible, wicked shit.
I can't even fathom who the fuck you are. A human being with a mind as brilliant as yours. You could do anything. And instead you choose to rain down misery and death.
No, you don't have it. How much evil do you have to do good?
None. The answer is none. None evil.
Let me give you all a little perspective. The key figure in a massive global, world-changing, I'll use your word, conspiracy, a conspiracy that has already taken the lives of several hundred children this past week alone, is sitting in your living room, and you're all standing around, listening to me talk, instead of running away from me as fast as you can. That tells me you're not gonna last. Not at the end. Not even Jessica Hyde. Do you know why? People think humans are driven by the search for happiness, meaning. That's not true. People are driven by the need to know what happens next. Do you want to know what happens next? Your father created a world-changing, not world-ending, a world-changing, world-improving omnivirus. And we have taken that virus and embedded it in the vaccine of this Stearns flu.
I knew it.
I knew it.
He created a panic, and now everybody's begging for the vaccine.
No. Demanding it with all the entitlement of a first world country.
Yes. And now we have exactly what we want. Hundreds of millions of Americans lining up, offering us their arms, and letting us give them our creation.
I'm pretty sure when every vaccinated person starts dying, they'll trace it back to undetectable virus or not.
You've all been very busy. You're all very sharp. Are you sure none of you would like to come and work for me? No? Better than dying a terrible, violent death? Then understand this. What we are doing is far bigger than death.
Wait, this virus is not deadly.
It looks pretty damn deadly.
Tell me this. What have you done today to earn your place in this crowded world? Exactly. Everything I do is a cure for our current situation.
You hate people that much?
On the contrary, I love people.
Then how? Why would you?
Doing what our government or citizenry is too spoiled or self-indulgent to do. We are saving ourselves from ourselves.
Halting overpopulation.
100 years ago, the global population was 1.7 billion. 2011, it reached
7 billion.
People live too long, die less often, fuck too much, shit out babies like...
In 2050, they say it's gonna plateau.
We'll blow past 11 billion and then slowly begin to decline.
But by then, it'll be too late to save an Earth that bears any resemblance to a world we actually want to live in.
By injecting your virus into the veins of every human on it?
Global warming, mass extinctions, food, water shortages. All these problems can be boiled down to one thing: overpopulation.
It's not as simple as that.
But it is. At 1.7 billion, we can be as decadent, self-indulgent, and shitty as we want. At 10 billion, we have to live strategically. We have to live modestly. We have to live selflessly. And as you know, we're not that good at it.
Stared at it, marveled at its beauty, its genius. Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious.
Did you know that the first Matrix was designed to be a perfect human world where none suffered, where everyone would be happy? And it was a disaster. No one would accept the program. Entire crops were lost. Some believed that we lacked the programming language to describe your perfect world, but I believe that as a species, human beings define their reality through misery and suffering. So the perfect world was a dream that your primitive cerebrum kept trying to wake up from. Which is why the Matrix was redesigned to this, the peak of your civilization. And I say your civilization because as soon as we started thinking for you, it really became our civilization, which is, of course, what this is all about. Evolution, Morpheus. Evolution. Like the dinosaur. Look out that window. You had your time. The future is our world, Morpheus. The future is our time. I'd like to share a revelation that I've had during my time here. It came to me when I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to an area and you multiply, and multiply until every natural resource is consumed. And the only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure. Why isn't the serum working?
Perhaps we're asking the wrong questions.
Leave me with him. Now.
Hold on, Morpheus. They're coming for you. They're coming.
Can you hear me, Morpheus? I'm going to be honest with you. I hate this place, this zoo, this prison, this reality, whatever you want to call it. I can't stand it any longer. It's the smell, if there is such a thing. I feel saturated by it. I can taste your stink. And every time I do, I fear that I've somehow been infected by it. It's repulsive, isn't it? I must get out of here. I must get free. And in this mind is the key, my key. Once Zion is destroyed, there is no need for me to be here. Do you understand? I need the codes. I have to get inside Zion. And you have to tell me how. You're going to tell me, or you're going to die.
Please remove any metallic items you're carrying, keys, loose change. Holy shit! Ugh.
What were you doing?
He doesn't know.
Know what?
I think they're trying to save him.
Hey, you epics, welcome. Andre Hodge, Infinite Potential Healing, Servant of Truth with you once more. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. I hope you are in a good state wherever you may be, and I hope you're up for some epic truth to add to the context of decoding what's going on. I've got some good stuff for you. And I've been brewing a lot over 6, 9, 12 months and stuff, and I've decided to go back into the theme that I started in April 6th, 2025. It's hard to believe it was April when I started this, and a lot has gone on since then. It's going to be the next one in the theme relative to money, politics, control, and our potential part 2. And I'm sure you're the same. Going out hunting information and listening to lectures, concepts, videos, TV shows and all that sort of stuff. And there's obviously been a lot in the political front and stuff like that. And my rationale for starting this series is I'm pretty good with money and I understand money, the energy of money. I consider money life force encapsulation technology as well as time tech. So you can save a lot of time if you've got money to invest in people and stuff like that. But you've also, ideally, like what I'm instilling in all I'm doing is the value of yourself, right? And yeah, it's just fascinating, the money theme and topic. But what I wanted to do was combine it with politics and control and our potential in it, because I've loved researching over the years. In my early days, there was a really interesting person called Joan Vione, and she's not known that well and stuff like that. She passed on, I think, 2014. And in that first part that I did in April, I offered a clip of her, and it was about the UN. And with all that's gone on in the last 5 or 6, 7 years related to World Health Organization, the UN, and stuff that's been rolled out that I've explained quite thoroughly in my Sovereignty Declaration, but in many releases as well and stuff. And there's this inertia to centralization and bodies and stuff like that, and the UN has been the mainstay since post-World War II and stuff. And so with what rolled out, it was a good time to look at it in a very structural level and what's its purpose and what's many things that are going on with it. And to appreciate that variable that's out there but not really understood or appreciated at its depth of things and stuff, right? And the other really big reason why I wanted to offer that first one was I wasn't making it too massive scale sort of stuff that I do. It was more about how to translate what's going on. And there was this really amazing half-hour lecture by this guy called Tom Lonago, I think that's his name. And I offered it in that part one. And to me, it's a real phenomenal decoding or codex of translating what's going on. He talked about games of chess and checkers, but he offered the translation of this world is actually related to the Chinese game of Go and all the different variables with that. And when I saw that many, many years ago, it was like, wow, thank you. And so it was really important for me to get this out there, because ideally it helps sort of see behind the narrative of what's going on and all the variables at play over here and there and there and there, how this butterfly flap over here might impact their sort of thing. And so in the recent weeks there's been the stuff going on in Venezuela and some basically acts of war that are going on without restraint, but they might have a purpose and all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, that was a really important release for me to get out there. But the Joan Vion section, I only offered a little clip, and I intended to do at the time, part 2 with the fuller variable of that. But what I felt is, in this many months since then, just in all the streams and going and looking at stuff, and you know, I like to offer that I'm pretty thorough and exhaustive and stuff, but believe me when I say this, I'm constantly finding stuff that I probably may have just let it go, even though I'm thorough. Maybe I watched it and it had no reference or it didn't have any impact at the time, and then I go through my journey and get all the context of the foundation things, and then it has massive implications of a data point that, you know, the conscious Tetris concept that I offered many years ago, and I do still, that just cleared many layers sort of thing. And in this time since I've done that, there's parts in this that I've only just discovered and that. And so the main body of this, I want to offer 3 videos. And I was saying I was intending to release a bigger part of the Joan Vion offering relative to the UN, but I'm probably going to do that later, because these parts offer a bit more context of the years in between that and what she offered, and then we can look at the UN at a bit of a bigger level, because one of the massive variables that I realized and I worked out in the many months since, particularly from June 21, where the US went in and bombed Iran. June 21, interesting, right? So what I worked out, and I've offered this and it's been probably a bit cryptic, but I worked out that, holy F, they're going to move the UN to L. And I call it L in the Middle East, right? Because there's the greater L and it's expanding and stuff like that. And they're, from my perspective, they're planning to move that over there. And that will be the one world order sort of stuff, right? And so that's been simmering silently in the background with a lot of distractions going on and stuff. But it makes perfect sense, and it's audacious and it's big scale, and there's no reference for that, but to me it feels so logical when you contemplate it and stuff, right? So then it's like, holy crap, like I felt the UN needed a lot of like it needed a lot of like it needed to be examined and discerned and called out, right? But then I realized this is just the next level masterful stuff going on, right? Is that, say, they're brewing up of like the calling out and the failures and all that justify a questioning of it and stuff. Well, this is the level of thinking you have to have. It's like these organizations will brew up, there'll be a lot of inertia in them and stuff, and then there'll be like a threshold where it's like, hang on a sec, and then there'll be like potentially it'll go from being the ally to the problem, right? And then we'll look at it that way. But if we look at the bigger scheme of things, then that was actually wanted because they've got a solution on the other side. David Icke used to call problem reaction solution. I think that's come from somewhere else. It might be the Hegelian dialectic. That might be something else, just off the top of my head. But so I was like, oh, like April, it's like, yeah, we need to call this shit out. And it's like, then on the other side of that and working on that, I was like, holy crap, am I contributing to that sort of thing, right? Because that's the plan, right? And that's just one little variable of the bigger plan and stuff. And so I'm really inviting, like, we all need to think at a bigger level and the scales of things, and not be overwhelmed by the infinite of things, right? Not have glass ceilings. We need to go through it. And you and I, we might be the ones that are only people that can actually contemplate all this stuff, right? So that's what I worked out, and I'll give some information about that and stuff. And it's like big, right? It's like, this has been planned for a long time at big scales, but it's not being so obvious and stuff. And there's a lot of ingredients that are going on as well that sort of like, say if that's an invasion and expansion going on, there's a lot of like, maybe there's variables in all the different regions that are a potential threat to that, and then being nullified, and if they're not being honoured, then something will be done, like a mass killing and stuff like that, to justify implementing laws that defend this rollout, if that makes sense. So I'm ideally going to give you a big codex of the truth to translate everything that's going on, because the UN and the stuff I'm going to be offering here is it's more about the last, say, 80, 100 years and the stepping stones of getting to the UN and stuff, but also the policies that have been rolled out that resulted in the last 5 or 6 years or 10 years, and where we are now, because this was planned like 30 years ago and stuff. So I'm going to be offering like a speech by David Rockefeller from 1994, right? And he talks about a lot of the stuff in there. And I'm going to be offering a clip from Bill Cooper. If you don't know who he is, he was someone very interesting, and he had a lecture in a book called Behold a Pale Horse, right? And I've got the book, and I'll do a little, bring it up and show you and stuff. But there was a clip in a lecture that was really good about the UN, Club of Rome, and all that sort of stuff. And then there was also a really interesting documentary that was released in 1973, and it's called The Limits of Growth, and it's about the Club of Rome stuff and that, and those sort of things were the foundations to where we're at and what's rolled out. And I feel it's going to be a very rich combination of information that will help you translate what's going on now. And then I'll obviously look to offer the greater Joan Vian clip at a future time, right? But I hope that's a really interesting intro. And I this is me being a rat, right? I think I'm going to go for the Nobel Peace Prize of Medicine this year. And I've worked out a lot of illnesses and pandemics out there and stuff. And one of the big ones, I'm going to call Tuckeritis, right? And it's like you give people truth, and there's like I'm going to call it a disease of the reaction, right? Like, I might be showing the clip here. It's from the movie Something About Mary. And it's like, you might be giving people the keys to unlocking their potential and their truth, but just watch their reaction, like their illness, of their flailing around and all that sort of stuff, the absolute avoidance of it, right? It might start with like a leg, like spasming and stuff, and then it might go into full flailing out to avoid it, right? So I want to offer to the world a new disease that's absolutely endemic called Tuckeritis, right? The avoidance of truth. And then there's Egypt River-itis, denial, like la, and batshit crazy-itis, and lie, pants on fire-itis. There's a lot of them that I've dealt with, right? But yeah, just watch out, like, for Tuckeritis. It's rampant out there, right? And you can drop a truth bomb with people and just get a gauging of their Tuckeritis level, right? There's more, there might be a flailing, there might be a River Egypt-itis combination, but then there might be full-blown Tuckeritis, right? So this might be quite a long release. The three main components, I think the David Rockefeller speech is about 20 minutes or so. The Bill Cooper clip is about 10 to 13 minutes, and I might break that up and put the Limits to Growth clip that might be about 30 minutes, and it's going to be very rich to combine all these. And the reason why I want to break up the Bill Cooper one is it just might be really good to finish off with his stuff, right? Because he was an epic teacher that called out 9/11 and stuff like that. He died just after that. And, there's a really good channel on BitChute called Hour of the Time, which is a lot of his radio shows, and I never had access to them when I got into all this stuff. And those early days, like 2008 on and stuff, it just wasn't on. YouTube wasn't really going then and stuff. Access to this information wasn't easy. So in defense of what I said at the start, the access to all this stuff wasn't as easy as it is now, even though a lot of the stuff has been taken down and all that. When after 2016 YouTube was hammered and a lot of people were deplatformed and stuff, right? So what I might do is offer the videos up front, and I'll do my images and stuff at the end. But what I might just do is show you an image that I drew today relative to the bigger plans, right? Because I want to get the information out front, and you guys that want bonus marks for study with my stuff at the end, because this might be quite long, I'll do my images and overview at the end with them instead of up front, right? But I just want to show you one image that I drew just now to explain the move of the UN to L, right? So I'm going to be quite vague in what I say and stuff like that relative to some things, but there's a lot on this image, right? So this is one of the massive things I worked out probably 6 months ago. It's like, holy crap, right? Because going back to October 2023 and what happened in early that month and stuff, and then I released Amplify the Echoes Part 12 because it was like the Ashes stuff wasn't really focused about that region, and it didn't add up, and I was questioning Stargate 12 relative to being in France versus over there, and I was working with the information there, but that helped. Those events that had gone on helped me like discern Asher and stuff, and I still love her stuff and that, but it helped me question that, and like why isn't this region of the world the major focus, right? With everything that's gone on and going back to the Crusades and all that sort of stuff. So I called out the evil under L. Like, to me, there's stuff running it, and L being Anunnaki and stuff. And in the last couple of releases, I offered, it was recalibration to a new energetic reality 14, I think. It wasn't the last one, it was one before, the main one. And I offered a clip from the late 80s, early 90s of Barbara Marciniak and her channeling and stuff like that. And what I've appreciated is that, to me, a lot of the concepts that are being seeded into spirituality in the alternate community are to distract us all from this, right? And it's actually like that utopian idea and all that sort of stuff of like something better that has led us, 2012 and all that sort of stuff. To me, a lot of that sort of stuff to me is seeded by this region to derail the intuitives, right? To distract us, grind us down, hijack us, and remove us as the intuitive threat that can see all this stuff, right? So a lot counterintelligence sort of, to me, is to derail that awareness, to be the resistance to all this stuff, right? And that should only offer to you of how epic you are, that this is needed. And then if you've managed to find me through that and make it through it, not to be beaten up, to pat yourself on the back, and then get your body right, get your state right, to anchor the antidote just as we are and stuff, and what is our potential after that. But to me, a lot of what's going on, so there's that flipping of the lack of support for the UN, alright? And there was three big things that happened since then. It's related to the US, right? And so, and I might show you the Zero Hedge articles in parallel to this. But on September 23rd, there was a UN article released, and it was pretty interesting. And what the US under Trump have decided to do is withhold, reduce, or totally eliminate their funding for the UN. Right? And it was like $1 billion a year or something like that, right? And what that meant is the UN were having to look at reduce their employment by 20% stuff, right? So I worked out that this is the potential going back in June, right? I had a bit of a month to process, and I got my version 5 of my sovereignty declaration going and stuff. And yeah, it was like, wow, like, isn't that interesting, right? And then on December 21st, interesting, there was another article released on Zero Hedge, and it was about what they call Project Sunrise, and it's about the rebuilding of Gaza post the war and stuff like that into a technological sort of mecca sort of thing, right? And they've earmarked like $112 billion to rebuild and all this sort of stuff, right? And just as my joke, I'm like, Trump's eyeing out land there. He wants to have Trump Gaza sort of stuff, and it sounds like a joke, but I don't think it is, right? And so there's all these plans after, if that makes sense, right? And then the third thing that's quite interesting, it happened like in this week, January 8th. The US has decided to withdraw from 66 global bodies and treaties, right? And 31 of them is on the UN, right? So, to me, it's that, right? New World Order, but a lot of these stuff that has structure, it's like that journey to another thing, right? Another structure, another establishment and stuff. So this withdrawing of, say, globalization and all that sort of stuff, right? The big thing that was going on in April was tariffs. Trump introduced tariffs to put a tax on imports, right? To then create the potential for businesses to make a lot more money by manufacturing locally in the US and stuff, right? So then it was like globalization was sort of end of an era and stuff, right? Then an interesting thing that happened, I think it was May, it was like Trump and Musk had a big falling out because the Epstein files and stuff like that. So there's a lot of show business for ugly people. That's what politics is, right? Just the show goes on sort of thing, and there's a lot of variables going on and friction, and this video is going to be too long to put the Discordian clip in, but I might do that in the next one. But so many just pointless things that people are getting into and stuff, right? But ideally what I'm going to offer you here is like more of a foundational variable that might link up to many things that are going on, that particularly about limits of growth and population. Like the population control is a big variable that's not talked about, but we have to look, like ideally what I'm going to do is offer this information in this release, and then it's going to help translate of what's happened in the 30 to 50 years since, and then it will add context to what's gone on these last 5 or 6 years, right? And then once you get that codex, and you'll see the plans that are underway to see what the potential is, and then keep an eye out at being able to translate it and pattern recognition and all that sort of stuff, right? So this intro is quite long already. This video is going to be quite long. So what I'm going to do is offer the full David Rockefeller speech from 1994 that's very interesting. He's obviously a very intelligent guy and smart, and you know, speaks very well and stuff like that, and it's important that we hear what they talk about. I feel it's good to offer this up front, and then I'll offer the 2 sections later, right? So what I'll do is I'll leave you with that now, and I'll see you on the other side. So enjoy.
Contribution to the United Nations and to world peace. Past recipients include Margaret Thatcher, Thomas Pickering, Javier Perez de Cuellar, Mikhail Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan, and George Bush. This evening, the prestige of this famous award is enhanced, again, as it's bestowed upon one of the formidable figures of the 20th century, a force for freedom and peace in the world, David Rockefeller. Please stand up here. You hold that. I'm going to list just a very, very few of David's contributions. He was the founder of the America Society, an organization that promotes inter-American cooperation. He helped found the Trilateral Commission, designed to promote understanding and cooperation among the nations of North America, Western Europe, and Japan. He was instrumental in creating the International Executive Service Corps, a group of volunteers from the private sector who provide technical and managerial assistance to private enterprise in developing nations. For 15 years, he served as the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. Among other international achievements, David Rockefeller is the honorary chairman of the Japan Society, an honorary trustee of the International House, and a member of the Advisory Council of the Bilderberg Conference. David, as the mayor of New York City, I want to thank you very, very much for bringing the United Nations to New York City. As a citizen of the United States, I want to thank you very much for all that you have done for America, you and your family. And as a citizen of the world, thank you for everything you've done for world peace.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, I must say I'm quite overwhelmed by this wonderful reception, and I do wish to extend a great many thanks to the mayor and to all of you for this extraordinary offer of an award to me on behalf of my family this evening. I'd have to say that I would like in turn to add my voice to others who have already spoken about Mayor Giuliani for the outstanding leadership that I feel he's provided to this city, something that we greatly needed. In just a short time, as Dick Vole has said, he's reversed a downward trend in the city and has and I think he's given New Yorkers a sense of hope and confidence that we haven't had for a considerable amount of time. Mr. Mayor, we're very grateful to you for that. I think I'd also be remiss if I didn't take this occasion to express my thanks to my good friends Dick Vole and Bill Murray and Sam Brookfield, and to all of you in the Business Council for the United Nations for selecting me as the recipient of this year's well-respected honor and medal. All the more so because in pursuing the names of the 6 previous recipients of the Business Council's medal, I find the following: 1 Secretary General, 1 Ambassador, and 4 heads of state. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I wonder how a mere retired banker could have been allowed to join that distinguished company. But I quickly add that I hasten to accept the award before you change your minds. I've long been an admirer of the works of the Business Council and wholeheartedly endorse its role of encouraging the interest and backing of the business community in the vitally important mission of the United Nations. Now, as the United Nations approaches its 50th anniversary, business support for the numerous internationally related problems in which it is involved has never been more urgently needed. But before sharing with you a few thoughts on the need for strong leadership in the world of today, I think I should just take a moment to express how deeply touched I was by the wonderful film that we've just witnessed, which traced my family's involvement in the early days of the United Nations. My father, as the film suggests, was a man of peace who believed deeply in the ultimate benefits of peaceful cooperation and continuous dialogue among the peoples and nations of the world. Recalling his role and that of my brothers, John and Nelson, as you may have noted, makes this occasion very especially meaningful for me. Had they still been alive, and I wish they were, I would have supported your conferring on one or all of them this award this evening. The film touched me briefly, but it also touched briefly on the history of the United Nations. I'd like to begin my own remarks this evening with a brief reflection on the history of the United States as it sheds light on our own involvement with the United Nations today. The United States, as the saying goes, is a nation of immigrants. The Pilgrims and other early pioneers came here from Britain and Western Europe to escape religious persecution and to find a new life of opportunity and freedom. Subsequent waves of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe brought both ethnic diversity and exceptional levels of talent and dedication to hard work. The reprehensible slave trade of the 17th and 18th centuries brought Africans to these shores and created institutions and social divisions that took a civil war and more than a century of concentrated effort to overcome. Yet African Americans today have become an essential and positive strand in the fabric of our nation. Most recently, waves of Latinos and Asians have contributed new elements to our rich cultural and ethnic diversity. For more than 400 years, the strength of this nation has lain in our capacity to absorb and transform a complex and diverse population into a homogeneous nation, where a single primary language provides a common basis for communication and mutual understanding. As our nation grew in numbers and expanded across the continent, opportunities flourished for anyone with ability and ambition. Underpinning this process of national expansion was our Constitution, crafted at the moment of our national independence by a group of talented and far-sighted leaders whose principles were firmly rooted in the ideals of democracy and individual freedom. 2 world wars in the first half of this century forced the United States to emerge from its primary preoccupation with internal expansion and economic growth to become a power with global influence and responsibilities. That is the position in which we find ourselves today, as the most powerful nation on earth, near the peak of our worldwide influence and authority. Indeed, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the discrediting of centrally planned economies, the opportunity for enlightened American leadership is perhaps even greater than it was in 1939 at the beginning of the Second World War, or in 1945 when the Cold War began. But this persistent window and this present window of opportunity, during which a truly peaceful and interdependent world order might be built, will not be here for too long. Already there are powerful forces at work that threaten to destroy all of our hopes and efforts to erect an enduring structure of global cooperation. I refer here to those ruthless advocates of ethnic nationalism who seek to break apart existing nations, as well as to militant fundamentalists who want to subordinate or even eliminate anyone who refuses to comply with their own rigid ideological beliefs. In contrast to those radical and divisive forces, our contemporary world has also seen the emergence of an array of scientific, technological, and economic phenomena that are linking nations more closely together, making enhanced cooperation not only possible, but absolutely imperative. Breakthroughs and advances in many fields such as genetics, molecular biology, computers, and telecommunications have given mankind the ability to revolutionize most aspects of our common life. Properly applied, these advances can be used to improve the human condition throughout the world, an objective to which I would believe that we all aspire. Ironically, however, the very innovations that are making possible dramatic improvements in human well-being are also creating new problems which raise the specter of an alarming and possibly catastrophic disaster to the biosphere we live in. And herein lies the dilemma that we all face. Let me illustrate. Improved public health has caused the world's infant mortality rate to decline by 60% over the last 40 years. In the same period, the world's average life expectancy has increased from 46 years in 1950s to 63 years today. This is a development which, as individuals, we can only applaud. However, the result of these positive measures is a world population that has risen during the same short period of time geometrically to almost 6 billion people and could easily exceed 8 billion by the year 2020. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. In particular, the rapid growing exploitation of the world's supply of energy and water is a matter of deep concern, and the toxic byproducts of widespread industrialization have increased atmospheric pollution to dangerous levels. Unless nations will agree to work together to tackle these cross-border challenges posed by population growth, overconsumption of resources, and environmental degradation, the prospects for a decent life on our planet will be threatened. The recent UN meeting in Cairo is appropriately focused on one of these key issues, population growth. But the controversies which have erupted at the conference illustrate the problem of coming to grips with issues that are deeply divisive and which have a profound moral dimension. The United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing world population and stimulating economic development in a manner that is sensitive to religious and moral considerations. Economic growth is, of course, an inevitable corollary of a growing population and is essential to improved standards of living. But without careful coordination, unrestrained economic growth poses further threats to our environment. This was a major subject of discussion at the conference in Rio de Janeiro on the environment 2 years ago. The focus then was on sustainable growth and global development. It was pointed out at the conference that growth is most efficiently managed by the private sector, but regulation of the process by national governments and international bodies is also needed. And once again, the United Nations should certainly be among the catalysts and coordinators of this process. But in addition, given the importance of unencumbered international trade in stimulating and facilitating economic growth, some of the newer economic entities, such as the European Economic Community, NAFTA, APEC, and most importantly, GATT, now known as the World Trade Organization, are probably best suited to play a major role in ensuring sustainable development. A common requirement for dealing with all of these challenges, technological, environmental, political, and economic, is leadership. Leadership coupled with mutual trust and understanding. There is no magic formula for finding and producing leadership. We've seen many fine examples of it in very small nations as well as among the great powers. I believe that most of the world is anxiously searching for strong and effective leadership, even a great moral vision for the future. And it looks to the United States to play that role. In my opinion, we have no choice but to become more intimately involved in the resolution of the complex problems that I have outlined. And it is clearly in our national interest for us to do so. I recognize that calling for expanded international involvement is not a particularly popular proposition in the United States today, at a moment when domestic concerns and isolationist leanings have a tendency to dominate the debate. But as we have seen in recent months in Bosnia and Rwanda, in North Korea and Somalia, in Haiti and Cuba, the fabric of social life can be torn very easily, and the effects inevitably spill across borders with harmful consequences to us all. I do not believe that the United States can afford to look the other way. Although we no longer teeter on the edge of nuclear abyss, the world is still a very dangerous place. And I fear that without stronger and more focused American leadership, it will become even more dangerous. A U.S. foreign policy that is marked by drift and ad hocery, having little clarity or vision, leaves our nation and the world vulnerable to geopolitical disaster. What is needed is a foreign policy that follows a coherent, strategically defined direction based on an understanding of history and national interest, but also well attuned to the needs of other nations. The world's complex problems cannot be taken up neatly in an orderly sequence. Instead, we must be prepared to deal with issues systematically and often simultaneously as they arise. This will require a well-coordinated foreign policy establishment and a decision-making structure that is given comparable importance with domestic policy components of our national government. I do not for a moment wish to suggest that world leadership on the part of the United States should imply world domination. Clearly it does not and should not. Nor does it mean the U.S. must alone assume the mantle of leadership or become the world's policeman. But like it or not, we live in a global society. We must understand it. We must comprehend the forces that are affecting it. And we must act forcefully to protect our own interests as well as to promote the continued progress of all the world's peoples. In accepting the Business Council's medal last year, President Bush said, "Real peace is not an accident, it's an art form, the result of planning and patience and sometimes personal diplomacy." In his personal message to the program for tonight's event, Secretary General Boutros Ghali noted that the reaffirmation and strengthening of democratic principles is of particular importance at this time. I agree, of course, with both of these propositions. I would only add that ultimately the strength and security of our nation derives from the purposefulness, self-discipline, and character of our own people. At this pivotal moment in our history, we cannot afford to hide our heads in the sand. We must make sure that 200 years of scientific progress, economic growth, and democratic rule are allowed to serve as the basis for our positive and constructive leadership in the family of nations in the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again from the bottom of my heart for the honor that you have bestowed on me this evening. Thank you very much.
Hey, welcome back. I hope you got a lot from that, alright? And thanks for still being here if you are, alright? So it's very interesting, alright? If you're into Telegram and stuff like that, there might be a clip of about 5 minutes or a minute or something of some of the stuff that he says in that. But I think it's very important to get the whole thing, alright? And have it all there and hear what he has to say and appreciate that was in 1994, and he talks about the post-war and the UN and stuff like that. And he talks about the growth and all that sort of stuff, the population issue and the challenges, and he talks about Rio and Cairo, those two UN conferences and stuff like that. So I feel that that will be a very, very good reference point and to look at and all that sort of stuff, right? And have as a marker point of things and that. So what I said at the start, what I wanted to do was offer a Bill Cooper clip and then a Limits of Growth Club of Rome clip, right? So Bill Cooper's an interesting guy, and I said go and have a look at the YouTube channel Hour of the Time as in time, HOUR of the Time. I think that's it. And there's some that I want to clip and I might have to ask them and stuff, and then there's some I'm pretty scared of freaking offering, but I shared that maybe in the last 18 months to a lot of people, one in particular that was just a massive codex relative to this. And I also recommend going and listening to my Influences Part 5 and 6, the one with Fletcher Prouty and the other one with the non-energy crisis with Lindsay Williams, because he talks about some stuff and that, and I may in the future offer clips from them, but they're very good, right? There's extra context for this relative to them. But I'll just show you Bill Cooper's book right quick. It's called Behold a Pale Horse. So when I first got into all this stuff, I remember going to a Borders bookstop. It could have been Borders or something else, but I went there and it was actually there. It was one of the first things I got into, along with Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton and all those sort of people. But this is a fascinating book, and I haven't read it for a while, but I didn't have a lot of context back then. I was pretty raw and it was just out there and interesting and stuff, and he seemed to be crazy and all that, but I like the crazy people that are, people that have been pushing it and seeing the truth. It's really tough to, that you want to go altruistic and do your best for people, and people have Tuckeritis, right? But yeah, this is a book out there, and I've had it for a long time and stuff, and what I'll show you is another book quickly. I've also got this book by David Icke, and I've had a few books by David Icke and I've lent them out and I haven't got them back and stuff like that. But I just offered David Icke because I've got this autographed. I'll just show it quick. He came and did a lecture in 2011, 14-hour lecture. It's pretty epic, and he was absolutely done at the end, but I said hi and he did a personal autograph and stuff like that. So it was good to be in the trenches and see these people and stuff, right? But this is a book at the time and stuff, and the reason I just show him is that he was one that I was introduced about the Club of Rome first, right? And again, going back then, I haven't looked at David since that much and stuff, with all the stuff I've been into and that. He offers a lot of data and stuff, and it's really cool, a bit like Michael Desone, but doesn't really offer solutions, and that's okay. That's where I get into the solutions and the pranic killing and stuff like that. But he was the one that really, for myself, had the reference of the Club of Rome, and he was talking about it, limits of growth and all that sort of stuff, right? And I'm not going to have time to go through and find the lectures and stuff. I've got a lot of lectures to go through, but like I said, it's freaking 14 hours, right? So I'm not going to be able to find that clips at the moment, right? But I just wanted to drop that here as well, okay? I'll show you one other thing. So one other guy out there was a guy by the name, I don't know if he's live still, but Chris Thomas, and he was on Miles Johnson Baser series pretty early on, I think part 10. and that would have been like 2011, 12 or whatever. And the reason I just bring this up is about the chips and implants. He was the one that introduced that to me, of that concept back then, and also he talked about the Akashic records, and I call them the Akashic bullshitter records. And I've offered multi-dimensional method to 3D Madness Part 14 late last year, and talking all about that, and Asher helped me work all that mechanics out and that. but the cool thing about this book is what it says, and he talks about the Anunnaki and all that sort of stuff. And the one variable about him was interesting, because he said that there was a population of 3.2 billion back then, and it was like just these red flags of variables that you what, dude, you know. But I'll just offer that because I'm thinking about going get those clips relative to chips and implants, and it might be interesting to put out there and stuff just as a reference so you can hear it. But that was another thing that came up, and this is quite interesting. And he's got another book about health and that, but they're pretty hard to get these days and stuff. But I just thought I'd show you that now relative to that era and theme and all of this stuff, right? So, because this is about the limits to growth and population control and all that sort of stuff, right? So, and just move on. So what I'm going to do now is offer the Bill Cooper clip from a Behold the Pale Horse lecture from around 92, 93, maybe 94. I think it would have referenced the David Rockefeller speech if it was after that, right? So it was the early 90s, around that time. And then what I'll do is I'll insert about a 30-minute clip of Limits to Growth documentary from 1973. And so this will combine the David Rockefeller content that was 20 years after that. That'll mix well with the Bill Cooper clip that I offer here, alright? So thanks for being here still. I hope you get a lot from this so far, and this will offer enormous context for what's going on, alright? So I'll see you on the other side.
Now, everybody wants to know, why do we have to have a one-world government? Why is it that they won't let us have these things that we know will cure disease? Why are they so hard on homeopathic medicine? Why this, why that, why this, why that? It's simple, folks. Once you really get into it, there is no doubt about it, there is a serious population problem. At the end of World War II, or actually during the war, they did a study to try to determine the effect of the returning soldiers from the war upon the economy. What these people who made the study projected was that there was going to be a whole bunch of babies born. They did a study again in 1957, which stated that the exponential increase of the population would ensure that the population would double between 1957 and 1990, and it did. They said that if something wasn't done, the increase in the use of insecticides, toxic chemical waste, effluent sewage, the pollution of the air, the use of fossil fuels, the use of timber, the increased need for raw materials was going to put us in a crisis, because they said that if something wasn't done to stop the growth of the population would double again 28 years from 1990. And it will. And then we will need twice as many trees, twice as many homes, twice as many cars, twice as much oil, twice as much food, twice as much everything. We will be putting twice as much sewage into the earth, twice as much pollution into the atmosphere, twice as much toxic waste material. And the study said if we don't stop this, if something isn't done, the human race will cause itself to become extinct shortly by or after the year 2000. Some people still didn't believe it. So the Club of Rome was formed secretly by Dr. Aurelio Pacheco in Rome, Italy. He got together a group of elite men and scientists, and they did another study and came up with exactly the same answers. They then commissioned a group of people in the United States at MIT. They put together a team to establish a computer model to determine what can be done to stop this, what can be done to ensure that it doesn't happen again, what can be done to ensure that the human race survives. And the answer is some of the things that I'm going to show you. All of this is in my book. It's thoroughly documented. It's going to really upset some of you, but it's true. The first indication publicly was this book written by Dr. Paul R. Ehrlich. Now, you all wonder why is Dr. Paul Ehrlich writing these books? It's because his wife, ladies and gentlemen, is a member of the Club of Rome. Next slide. This was copyrighted first in 1968. It was the first indication of the results of the secret studies.
Our riches and our numbers burden the world.
If you remember the dramatic pictures taken by the Apollo flyers of the Earth, standing out in space all by itself, no one after seeing that could deny that the world is finite. Then it's impossible for people to go on saying we have an infinite supply of air, an infinite supply of water, an infinite supply of minerals. Man must learn to balance his activities in nature against the regenerative power of nature, or he is inevitably going to join the Tyrannosaurus in extinction.
As we grow richer, there is rising concern about pollution, our ability to feed a growing population, and fears that we may run out of fuel and metals.
A computer at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has been used to look at these problems, to analyze in broad terms the direction in which our world is headed. Sponsored by a group of businessmen and academics, the Club of Rome, its conclusions are revolutionary.
The most important lesson is that we're near the end of our development of society, which has been going on for about 2,000 years. And we've reached levels of prosperity which carry the seeds of disruption and necessitate a complete relook at the whole world's social, political, and other situations.
It's telling us that the world is in a completely unstable situation and is likely to fall to pieces if it doesn't stop growing.
Let's put it bluntly. Our option is not between this kind of society, present society, and a stable state society. It is between a stable state society and chaos.
The world is 6 billion years old. That is unimaginable. So think of it as a week. All through Sunday and most of Monday, nothing much happens. Late Monday night, a cell divides. Life has begun. Through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and most of Saturday, life becomes more complex and more beautiful. In a barren universe, life on Earth is being sustained by an increasingly stable and complex biology. At tea time on Saturday, it is the age of the reptiles. At 3 minutes to midnight, man appears. 1 second before midnight, man the hunter becomes man the farmer. At 1/40th of a second to midnight, the Industrial Revolution begins.
It is now midnight. In that last 40th of a second, we have started to get richer at an ever-increasing rate. Growth is explosive. Population now doubles in 30 years. Man now uses twice as much energy as he did 15 years ago. And industrial production has nearly trebled in the last 15 years.
During this program, men on the Earth will consume 200,000 tons of petroleum and 200,000 tons of coal, produce 2,000 motor cars, and use 400 million kilowatts of electricity.
If we use known stocks at present rates, there will be no copper left in 2008. No zinc in 1995, no tin in 1989, and no mercury in 1985. There will be no silver, without which we cannot make films, in 1987.
Today we consume more than yesterday. Our children, if they live as we do, will use up resources more than twice as fast as we do.
Our grandchildren might need twice as much oil as we found in Alaska just to meet their increased needs for 1 year.
Such growth threatens to use up all the resources the Earth has to offer us. Such are the enormous needs of the industrial society in progress.
The Industrial Revolution has consumed vast quantities of fossil fuels, for example, and now there aren't many left. And it's as simple as that. If you have a kind of society which is going to eat the very planet we're on, eat it up, consume it, you will find that there's nothing left.
Our industry, the way we make things, attacks the fabric and stability of nature, the ecosystem, on which all life, including man, depends.
It has been developed to exploit the ecosystem without taking into account its continued existence. And our new technologies tend to disrupt ecological cycles, to break them, to intrude harmful, unnatural materials on them, and therefore to destroy the base of its own existence. Because of that, we are on a suicidal course.
We are faced by dilemmas. Industry cannot exist without the raw materials it must use up. Nor can it function without the natural world that it may be destroying. So great is our progress that it may push the earth to its limits and beyond. We threaten a confrontation with nature. Progress to that confrontation is speeding up.
What we're really being told is that although nobody knows for sure exactly when it will happen or exactly what risk is the greatest risk man faces, Scientists are fairly unanimous in saying that man does face extremely important risks.
When global population is doubling every 33 years, when resource consumption is doubling every 20 years, no long-term view of mankind can proceed without first forming some preliminary answers to these questions.
Professor Dennis Meadows, at a conference in Washington to mark the publication of his team study for the Club of Rome, The Limits to Growth. It concludes that economic growth always generates a crisis, that the road to riches is the road to disaster.
Even if we solve problems like pollution, growth within a century or so would lead to widespread famine and social chaos. Dennis Meadows and his team used a computer. He explains why.
With system dynamics, a methodology that we use, we organize the available information on the relationships in some system, and then we express these mathematically and put them into a computer to calculate the results. It's possible for men to perceive the individual relationships in a system, but very difficult indeed, without any assistance from a computer, to understand what their implications will be when they interact.
At first sight, there doesn't seem to be much relationship between farming and industry, but industry produces pollution, and pollution affects crops. So a change in industry affects farming via pollution. The man-made world consists of a whole complex of subtle relationships like that. Change one thing, and it sets up a slow and complicated chain reaction.
The equations in the computer define these relationships, so the computer can show how one thing affects everything else, not only immediately, but over many years. The runs on the computer show how these things would interact and affect man's future. They used the computer to see what would happen if man successfully tackled his obvious problems, if he grew more food, found more natural resources, and controlled pollution.
But first they ran the computer to see what direction the world would take if it ran its present course.
As the century unfolds, industry grows, as does food production and population. But we're using up all our raw materials, the limited metals and fuel in the earth. These run out. Without fuel and metals for the factories, industry collapses. Farming has become highly mechanized, and without petrol and electricity, food production falls too. There's no food and massive unemployment, so the population falls. People are dying. Dennis Meadows explains.
Because of the high population levels and the increasing industrialization, natural resources are depleted at an increasing rate, and finally they fall down to the point where the industrial system can no longer be sustained.
What might this mean in human terms to the average Western family? Over 50 years or more, we get richer. We consume more and more resources. Things like gas and electricity. When essential raw materials like oil and copper run out, civilized life ends.
If we go on as we are, society collapses because we run out of metals and fuel. Growth is halted by a resource crisis.
Science and technology could help us here. We might find new sources of fuel, use nuclear power, or harness the energy of the sun to replace oil and coal. Metals could be used more carefully. We could save and sort out our scrap. We might find substitutes for scarce metals. So they ran the computer to see what would happen if we solved the resources problem that caused the crisis in the first run.
This time, natural resources used carefully run down slowly. But industry continues to grow. This industrial growth produces a serious pollution problem. Pollution attacks both people and plants. Crops cannot grow, and farming starts to fail. The population starts to collapse when people die of hunger and pollution. Industry, without a workforce, collapses too.
But now pollution is permitted to rise because industrialization goes further, and finally pollution begins to impair the lifetime of the people and the productivity of the agricultural sector.
This time, then, growth is not stopped by a resource crisis. Our family grows richer, consuming more and more goods. But the factories producing these goods are also producing pollution. This time it is pollution that halts growth in catastrophe.
To keep growing, we need more raw materials. If we find those materials, growth continues till we die of pollution.
But we could control pollution. Indeed, we are already beginning to do so. We know how to clean up our water and air. The pollution created by technology can be restrained by technology. So in the next run, they assumed not only that we had solved our raw materials difficulties, but that we had controlled pollution as well.
So resources still run down slowly. Industry can expand. Pollution, now controlled, doesn't become a problem. Growth is progressing. But this time the population grows so large that food becomes a problem. Food production cannot keep pace with population. People starve. And industrial society collapses.
In this case, the land resources become insufficient, pressure on the land begins to lead to land deterioration, and finally food per capita collapses and brings about a population decline.
This time, the problem is food. Growth provides us with increasing wealth, but as the population grows, food becomes more and more expensive. The growing food shortage turns slowly to famine.
So if growth is not halted by pollution or a resource shortage, it is halted by a food crisis.
But there could be a solution to that too, the Green Revolution. Scientists have been able to double and even treble yields. We can grow more food. So on the next run, as well as pollution controls and a careful use of resources, they assumed that food production could be doubled.
Resources, still used carefully, fall slowly. Pollution still controlled is no problem. And now food production, backed by the Green Revolution, rises. The system is experiencing explosive growth. The lines go off the graph. This growth of industry is so huge and rapid that it suddenly generates a pollution problem, despite pollution controls. And the industry and the population collapses.
Because land is no longer a limit to growth, industrialization rises to the point where, even with the pollution control measures we had before, pollution becomes a very serious problem and again brings about the collapse.
So if we control pollution, conserve natural resources and grow more food, growth is still halted by a pollution problem.
Technical solutions are not sufficient. Pollution control, resource conservation, and the Green Revolution serve only to postpone or worsen the crises. The obvious is not enough.
The runs illustrate very succinctly that pollution, natural resource depletion are not problems themselves. The problem is growth in a finite world. So long as we ignore that fact and rely on growth over the short term to solve our problems, overshoot and collapse of the form which we see in the world model seems to us to be absolutely inevitable.
Famine, pollution, and scarcity are not really problems. They are symptoms. Symptoms of growth.
But what about population? Was instability due to the pressures of population growth? A population that doubles every 30 years, that adds 70 million extra human beings to the planet every year? They ran the computer to investigate what would happen if nothing but population were controlled.
Population is stabilized. Only 2 children per family. Industrial production and food production surge ahead, and pollution rises too. The system is growing. But again, industry uses too many resources which run out, bringing down the system yet again. Even with population controlled, growth brings us up against a resources problem.
So population control is not sufficient either. They made other runs on the computer, different combinations of policies. However they juggled population controls with pollution controls, with resource conservation, with food production, the result was a breakdown. A breakdown that implies millions of deaths and the collapse of civilized life. What had been the reaction of informed opinion to this study and its bleak prognosis?
Well, I think the study makes an important contribution to the environmental dialogue. It points up some of the fundamental issues that man is going to have to grapple with if he's going to survive and continue to improve his position on this planet.
I think this has 2 important advantages over other studies in this field, and there have been many other studies. The first is that the computer allows you to handle a very complex situation, an enormous number of interrelated effects, so complex that one could not grasp all these within one human mind. But the computer can handle those easily and explore the way they react upon each other and how they evolve. That's the first point. Second point, I think, is that because you have to put it into a computer, you have to get all your assumptions out on the table. And that means that the thing is very precise, and if someone doesn't like the model or the assumptions, they can see exactly what bits they don't like and take those out and put their own in.
Skeptics say forecasts of doom are the result of doomsday assumptions. Make different assumptions, change the equations a little, you will produce very different results. If you put nonsense into a computer, they say, you get nonsense out.
I think that's a very reasonable response. The question comes, of course, is it possible to put something into the computer which can be defended as reasonable, which alters the conclusions? I'm rather confident that while in the precise nature of our conclusions there will ultimately be made changes, that the general conclusions, the fact that growth has a tendency to resolve itself through collapse, those conclusions are simply not going to be altered by any reasonably defensible additions to the model.
The computer does not predict. It sketches the direction in which our world is moving. It clarifies some of the conflicts between the natural and the man-made world. Nature is balance. Tamper with one part of it, and the complex and unexpected will turn up in another part. That is what the study shows.
Biological societies, too, are highly interconnected. Intervention in one part, increasing, say, food production, may have unexpected and unfortunate results elsewhere.
It doesn't prophesy, but it does give us a new way of seeing the world. It is showing us how and why some of our most...
The model is simple. The world is complex. The crude predictions we see in the study would appear in the world in much more complex ways. The real event, if it happens, would certainly be more complicated. And different kinds of countries are vulnerable in different ways.
It seems obvious to us that decline, if it does come, will be experienced at different times and in different ways in various societies. The United States might conceivably have a natural resource problem, while Japan could conceivably fail to cure its pollution problems and be led into difficulty that way. Some of the less industrialized areas at the same time might be having a food crisis.
The world is running out of many things that it needs. Fossil fuel, for example, is the classic example. But food. We are very, very short of food, and we have 2/3 of the world undernourished to prove it.
A report from the World Bank reads,
What are we to say of a world in which millions of people are faced with day-to-day deprivations that degrade human dignity to levels which no statistics can adequately describe?
Many millions of people already starve to death in the world. Pollution is killing people, not very many. The health of a large number of urban dwellers is being decreased because of environmental deterioration.
There is authoritative and growing evidence that we are polluting the planet.
Generations will never see the sun. The year 2000 will be sufficient to melt the polar ice cap, placing most of the
in an irreversibly polluted situation.
Turns up in the drinking water of the city of Buffalo, New York.
It's nitrate, appreciable amounts of nitrate in most parts.
We don't know how heavily.
Blue baby disease.
Perhaps millions of people breathe the dust.
Very real danger of large-scale contamination.
Is there evidence that the base forces shown in the model are already at work in the world today? Some would say so, and go further. See the symptoms of growth in Vietnam and Bangladesh, in crime rates, and the state of the world's great cities.
You look at the city in America already. The city is falling apart from the center outwards, so that you can't walk in the center of the big American cities without running grave physical risks. They're covered in concrete in cars. The poorer people can't get out of the center and therefore form ghettos. The problems are overwhelmingly bad. I would go so far as to say that the troubles we see are all part of this business of an overloaded society that doesn't know how to conduct itself any longer.
Slide out of the car. We have to begin to solve the problem of drug abuse in this country right now.
symptoms of what Meadows is talking about, in my opinion. They're symptoms of instability, and that is what Meadows' model is telling us.
If one looks at the whole world, it is becoming better cultivated and more fully peopled than anciently. All places are now accessible, all open to commerce. And where once were hardly solitary cottages, are now large cities. What most frequently meets our view is our teeming population. Our numbers are burdensome to the world, whilst nature fails in affording us her usual sustenance. Our wants grow more and more keen, and our complaints more bitter in all mouths. In every deed, pestilence, famine, and wars have to be regarded as a remedy for nations, as a means of pruning the luxuriance of the human race. Those words were an eyewitness report made during the decline of the Roman Empire.
The Dark Ages followed. If this study is right, then our society is threatened. No one knows when or how. But if it does mirror the world, if we can see in our problems the stresses of growth, then the world is unstable. Growth, it seems, has an awful logic.
It is so obvious, in a way. It's so simple to consider that we cannot continually and exponentially grow as we are doing now. Nothing in the world, nothing in life grows continuously.
Growth leads to crisis.
What then if we stopped getting richer?
The first indication publicly was this book written by Dr. Paul R. Ehrlich. Now, y'all wonder why is Dr. Paul Ehrlich writing these books? It's because his wife, ladies and gentlemen, is a member of the Club of Rome. Next slide. This was copyrighted first in 1968. It was the first indication of the results of the secret studies. This was published by Paul Ehrlich. Next. It says here, probably accurate to say that if all the food produced in the world today were in some sense equally distributed, that everyone would have an adequate diet. Does that mean that those who claim that there is no population problem, only a problem of distribution, are correct? Absolutely not. Population pressures are a product of animals as they exist, not as they might be. If lions ate grass instead of antelopes, the plains of Africa could support many more of them before the plains would be overpopulated. Similarly, the carrying capacity of Earth for saints is considerably higher than the carrying capacity for Homo sapiens. In theory, the problem of human overpopulation could be solved by a reduction in population size or by a change towards more saintly behavior. The current situation of global overpopulation is so serious, and the built-in potential for further population increase is so great, that the only sensible strategy for humanity today is to end population growth and start a population decline as rapidly as is humanly possible, simultaneously striving to achieve a more equitable distribution of the food and other goods of this planet. Limiting births and increasing social justice are not alternative strategies to preserving society. They are, ladies and gentlemen, necessary complements. Next slide. Now, here is the key. In this book, Paul Ehrlich told us that they had already decided on the solution because they had tried zero population growth and we didn't buy it. We didn't buy it. Worked in some small areas, but it didn't work in many, and it certainly didn't work worldwide. This paragraph tells you everything that you ever need to know about what is happening today and will answer a lot of your questions. Basically, then, there are only two kinds of solutions to the population problem. One is a birth rate solution, in which we find ways to lower the birth rate. Didn't work. Didn't work. The other is a death rate solution, in which ways to raise the death rate, war. You asked me about the Middle East. You asked me about what happened to Iran. You asked me about El Salvador. You asked me about Nicaragua. You asked me what's going to happen in the future. This paragraph tells you what's going to happen. Famine, pestilence, find us. They have just shut off the water to all the farmers in the San Joaquin Valley. They produce 50% of all the vegetables that are consumed in this country. Do you believe that's an accident after reading this? Large corporations and banks have been forcing the small farmer out of existence and buying up land which sits fallow. Do you think that's an accident? We have sold all of our grain to the Soviet Union. Do you think that's an accident? There's not 20 days supply of grain in this country if we needed it in an emergency. Now listen to this. The problem could have been avoided by population control, in which mankind consciously adjusted the birth rate so that a death rate solution did not have to occur. He's telling us, ladies and gentlemen, that they have already decided upon it and that it is in effect. Next. The next warning was the limits to growth. This was published by the Club of Rome. Next. The conclusions are, and this is only what they've revealed to the public, what they told to the power elite of the world is an entirely different story and is much more radical. If the present growth trends in world population, industrialization, pollution, food production, and resource depletion continue unchanged, the limit to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years. The most probable result will be a rather sudden and uncontrollable decline in both population and industrial capacity, and what they don't say here that they said in the secret report is that the masses of people in the world will result to the overthrow of their government and anarchy will reign as they try to feed themselves and their families and find jobs. It is possible to alter these growth trends and to establish a condition of ecological and economic stability that is sustainable far into the future. The state of global equilibrium could be designed so that the basic material needs of each person on Earth are satisfied and each person has an equal opportunity to realize his individual human potential. Who would suffer the most under such a plan? Not the rich, ladies and gentlemen. They are in control. It's going to be us. Americans consume most of the raw materials in the world. 50% of the energy supply is consumed in this country. We pollute the earth more than any other nation. It is us who are going to have to go back and live like our ancestors did, and they're going to make us if we don't learn how to do it on our own. I'd rather be a volunteer than a slave. I don't know about you. If the world's people decide to strive for the second outcome rather than the first, the sooner they begin working to attain it, the greater will be their chances of success. And down in the last paragraph, something really important. These conclusions are so far-reaching and raise so many questions for further study that we are quite frankly overwhelmed by the enormity of the job that must be done. We hope that this book will serve to interest other people in many fields of study and in many countries of the world to raise the space and time horizons of their concerns and to join us in an understanding and preparing for a period, and listen to this because they're not kidding, it's coming very soon, for a period of great transition, the transition from global to global equilibrium. Henry Kissinger said when asked what he foresaw for the coming decade, he said, everything will be different. There will be a new world order. Many will suffer For those who survive, the world will be better. And the last thing he said, we will have the world we have always wanted. Now, if you know anything about Henry Kissinger, he never wastes words, and he knows what's going on. Next. This is the regionalized and adaptive model of the global world system from the computer model at MIT, designed for the Strategy for Survival project of the Club of Rome. Patriots in this country have been running around calling the Club of Rome a subversive organization. They've been trying to ensure our survival. They're a study group, a think tank. That's all they are. They don't make the decisions. Next.
Hey, you epics, welcome back. Thanks for still being here. Hope you've got a lot from it so far. Very interesting. Hey, didn't put them in school, did they? Well, they've been hard to find and all that sort of stuff, right? So just my aims with all this is, like I said, to offer a bit of context for what was done 50 to 30 years ago and all the plans then that have taken 30 years to roll out. That if we look at what's gone on in the last few years and the intent behind them, that I've sort of put in my sovereignty declaration, if you've gone through that and stuff, and many of the releases, this is more in the society sort of stuff, but it percolates to the big levels, trickles back to them, and then it percolates to the individual level and stuff. So it's fascinating. And then if you have this as a foundation, then why are they doing this? That's the basis. They're worried about this, or they're trying to do this, or they're trying to maneuver that, they're trying to limit that and handicap that. So say the West, the cost of living's gone up, so people don't have children, or if you have kids, you want to get into the good regions with the good schools, because they limit the regions where you can go to a particular school these days and stuff. So if you're wanting to bring kids in, you want to give the best lifestyle to afford the best houses and afford the council rates and all that. Or other regions of the world, you want to come to a modern world and stuff like that, or a first class society and stuff. And so you might be wanting to go to a better society to have an existence there and stuff. And that's all been supported to derail the West and stuff, to make the cost of living and stuff, and then the net zero and all that, and then the sexual sort of stuff, and the different policy, like political views and all that have been supported. And there's a lot of chaos and discordianism. But if you trickle back, why don't you ask this question? How does this relate to the limit of growth or the population control? Or how does this want to stop that? Or how did this and that? And you might be an idealist and want the best for people and stuff, and a lot of people might have that facade that they are, but they're very selfish and stuff. And when there's uncertainty like this, then people retreat, and then they'll, they might want to. One big study that happened after 9/11 was the birth rate went up, because that schism of the fear of what happened in society triggered the true fear state, and then the population survival. So a lot of people had children and babies and stuff like that, so the birth rate went up in a state a lot of fear, if that makes sense. So what people present themselves versus what they actually are and do are two potentially different things. And that's where it's say me, I actually, you have to go through the challenges like the rites of passage to see the truth, and how you deal with lack of funds, or being in a foreign region, or being energetically impacted and stuff, and still having to push through life and stuff like that, and not going to fear and stuff. And it's just really fascinating. There's that clip from Ram Dass that I include a lot. It's about the three things that people do in a potential state of fear, right? So I might show that again, and it's pretty quick, right? So I'll see you on the other side.
You spoke a little earlier about making political decisions and judgments in terms of how it fits, I think, with one's heart.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that in...
Not heart, emotional heart. You know, heart like Chinese sin, or the Atma, meaning the deepest place of truth.
The core.
The deepest intuitive place in one's being, yeah. Excuse me, go ahead.
Well, that notion would seem to contradict what we see very much in the world about us now, which are religious political movements, you know, the moral majority or the Islamic fundamentalism, where in the name of a particular religious dogma, certain political planks are established, and everyone within that organization or within that tradition is expected to support a particular political attitude.
When there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty. When there's a lot of uncertainty, there is usually a lot of fear attendant to it. And how people react to fear is interesting. Some people just consume more. They say, I'll get it while I can because it's all going to blow up anyway. They become more and more materialistic. Some people they want to be on the right side when the doors close, so they become fundamentalists in one sense or another. They grab on to right as opposed to evil. They want to be one of the 144,000 that gets in the door. And the other group uses the uncertainty, as a way to deal with their inner relationship to uncertainty, and they go inward. And you can see the society dealing with the fear that way. And so that real thrust to the kind of righteousness is staying at the plane of good and evil. It's staying at the plane of polarities. And it's not seeing, as G. Manly Hall said, that he who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me.
Hey, welcome back. Yeah, really cool. Hey, like, they might want to be the ones in the group. So you imagine a lot of people go into the UN or these bodies and they think they're the ones that are not going to get culled or whatever and stuff. And then, like I said, the system flips on them, and then they're the ones that are the target and all that. So they're like the sellouts, if that makes sense. And then there's the people that want to hoard the shit. And so a bit like those things in society that I said, the service to self will kick in. I mean, I don't want to put the clip about the people in Australia fighting over toilet paper back in 2020 when the lockdowns were on and shit, but those things were pushed about making us feel that our fellow man isn't... It's the individualization of people and the service to self, because the lack of resources and stuff, you know, you want to... I don't know. I remember playing musical chairs as a kid and stuff like that. And so the music will go around and stuff, and there'll be like 10 kids, but then there'll be 9 chairs, and, you know, the music stops and you have to get a chair, and then the person that doesn't get the chair, they get cut, right? And then the next time there's 8 chairs, 7 chairs and stuff. The real truth of most people is they want to, when the music stops, they want to have a chair, right? And so they'll F you over for that chair, and they won't, you know, it'll be justified in their mind and stuff. And I think, like, the huge uncertainty in society that's been on the last few years and stuff, particularly, say, the US with what was going on pre the recent election where Trump got in and stuff, and you saw that service to self really kick in and stuff like that. But I really appreciate that Ram Dass Singh is, the third option is going within and using what's going on to become a better person and intuitively awaken and stuff like that. So I'm sure that is the case with you, and, you know, unfortunately we're probably all burnt by people that we've trusted and thought we could trust and stuff in those sort of times and stuff. But again, what I'm about is our intuitive potential and where are the ceilings that are blocking us and all that sort of stuff. So what I'm aiming to do, and all I do and all that, is arm you up with data that's very rich for your pattern recognition and stuff like that. So I might just go through those images that I said, try and not make it too long, but just go over a few things and just put the icing on this cake, right, of this truth bomb that I'm, like this massive Tuckeritis identifier, right, video that I'm going to release, right. So I'm just going to show the images, right. So this is the pattern recognition image that I've shown many times and stuff like that, but what I'm just offering is about all those variables at the start and how I came to this conclusion and stuff, and just employing all this data and stuff. And ideally your pattern recognition skills have really gone off the charts and you're feeling really clear and awesome and stuff like that. And this video, this theme, is offering a lot more data to your pattern recognition to see through it and make it very easy to navigate, right? So I'm just going to move on. So this is about the narrative of the information out there in the public and stuff like that, alright? So this information is probably going to the second level of the narrative. It gets beyond the public and all that, and it's not getting too big, right? This is about the structures of society and how that percolates down to the individual, right? But being able to contemplate this, it's challenging the narrative in most people and stuff like that. And the whole limits to growth and population control sort of variable is not a very pleasant one to even contemplate. That people out there would even be willing to do it and stuff, but we have to be willing to accept these things are going on, to challenge our narratives and those of, to see what's going on, as well as challenge, like not being governed by needing to appease others and walk on their eggshells and stuff, right? They're Tuckeritis, right? Just gonna move on. So this translates into a bit of what I said there, but you know, if you have a limit of what you're willing to accept, like, no way, people wouldn't want to limit the population and stuff like that. It's like, if you have that barrier, then you won't be able to accept the patterns of what's going on and stuff, right? So it's a time to be informationally courageous and seeing the what is of what's going on, right? And how that translates into your ability to navigate and ideally have an awesome life in spite of all this stuff, right? I'm just going to move on. See this centralization sort of stuff as a high level in the narrative, but to me it goes beyond that, of the bigger structures of all the stuff I've said that percolate down, and then once you get the reference of the truth, then you can sort of see how the edges of the pattern form and translate everything that's going on, and then ideally see the patterns and feel it going on and yet to unfold, right? So this is a way to break down all the information sets to the bigger scales, to the society sort of level, and then the individual level, right? And I've done this in the Sovereignty Declaration in a very high level of detail, right? But this is more focusing on the society and then affecting us as the individual and those we care about, right? So I haven't shared that for a little while, but this is all how to translate everything, and you can put the variables related to things in their boxes relative to this and see how they percolate through down to the individual level. Right? And this is the context image of having a foundation of the truth to be able to navigate and pattern recognition and stuff like that. So ideally I've armed you up with a lot of data that is under the foundation of society to help you see what's going on and then navigate, and ideally be the epic being that you have in the potential to be beyond who you are now, to be an ally in navigating what is to come with all the potentials and variables and scales of things unfolding, right? This is the image I showed just before I started the videos, right? And this is the big thing that I've worked out since that money, politics, control, and our potential part 1 in April. It's like the images in this, or the videos I've offered in this video about the UN and the establishment of that 50 to 30 years ago and stuff, and what's happened since. And then what I said is a lot that's going on now is, in my mind, it's seeing through all that's gone on to then use it to as a major chess move, or the go move relative to part one of moving everything to L, and then the New World Order spawning from there. And so there's been a lot of, I've got this list here about the laws, and there's epic destabilization that's been going on around the world. Like you look at the Middle East the last 30 years and stuff like that, countries around L, then there's the greater L expanding into those destabilized regions. If you remember the big explosion that happened in Lebanon in 2020, the big fertilizer explosion that basically devastated Beirut and stuff, the country couldn't afford to basically deal with that and stuff, right? Then there's religion. That's the one you got to focus on. Then there's a lot of leaders, particularly in the US, with dual citizenship and stuff like that, and who are they aligned to and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of religions over there that are aligned to all this and support of all this, right? And I think like the stuff that Elon Musk and Trump had a falling out about, the blackmail sort of stuff, I think that's being used to coerce for this to unfold, right? Because there's questions of who he was aligned to, Jeffrey Epstein and all that, right? Okay. And then a big thing is the censorship laws of not able to question the evil that's unfolding in L, you know? And then say what happened in Australia the last few months in Sydney, something really horrible, right? Around Christmas time. Because potentially, say, Australian rules relax, so then there was stuff that happened that forced reaction to it, right? So I'll just offer those sort of patterns, right? Because to me it's like they're creating the laws to like censor the opposition to all this sort of stuff, right? So it's very strategic, very subtle. There's a lot of Discordianism going. There's a lot of go moves being played. But I feel that this is the crazy scales of things that are going on and planned for a long time, right? And it's hard to believe and all that. And right now it doesn't seem to be the case, right? But I would just offer like, let's see what happens, right? So I'll just move on. So I don't know how long this is going to be, but I'm needing to come to the end either way, right? So just interesting times, right? Fascinating to be alive. And I hope all this information is very empowering to that, and it also benefits your existence and stuff. And then it arms you up to be an ally in the nullification of its potential, right? And at least like seeing it for what it is. And to me, it would be nice that the structures in society are there for our betterment and stuff, but we have to really be appreciative that the masterful nature of things rolling out, that everything that's offered isn't actually an ally, it's a part of that. And, you know, the negative things that go on in society that, you know, might prompt someone to want to rise up and all that sort of stuff, and they're on a foundation of their victimhood to go against something that's been orchestrated all along. And so we have to be really willing to raise our bar of what's going on to see it and not fall into the trap. Because to me, at this stage, the intuitive potential is the threat and the solution. And that's why I'm massive onto our intuitive infinite potential, right? Because I've worked out the strategy on the energy level to go after that level so this doesn't percolate through, because the only way we can sort of do this is we go after that to nullify that and take back our universe. And so this, and the origin of all this stuff has no authority or power anymore. And so that's where I really encourage you to go and do my declaration and get into sessions, or get into your own, being your own healer and exercising your multidimensional intuitive sovereignty and all that sort of stuff. I feel I've worked out the solutions, and my journey's been tough, and I've shared it, and it, up until late last year it was really rough, but I feel like I'm the best I'm ever been. And like that last video about powering into the new era, it's like, bring it, like, let's go, like, you've had a massive advantage and now we see you and that's all you can do, like, let's freaking take it, right? So I'm really on my game, and I look forward to seeing you if you come through and stuff like that, and let's see where we can go. But I'm going to round it out and just thank you for being here, and thank you for all you've had to endure and making it to being here now and stuff. And I hope this adds to the vastness of your epicness, and it helps you take you to a whole new level, right? So thank you as always. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. And I've got I'm brewing a lot of videos and stuff like that, and I need to get back into the multi-dimensional internet theme and stuff, and that's like a bit of a parallel to this theme and stuff, to see like the structures and the organization at play. If you watch that first part, it gets into, you know, the communism sort of Russia versus US Cold War and all that sort of stuff. That was just, to me, it was like two parts of rolling out the internet sort of stuff, right? So I hope this helps you gain the courage to not tolerate the Tuckerism of everyone else, right? Tuckeritis, right? And don't walk on the eggshells. Like, we need to be able to like just carve our path through all this crap and show there is another way, and lead and own it. And yeah, it's just like the weakness in people, it's just fascinating, right? So you probably don't realize how strong you are and how courageous you are just to even entertain this stuff. And just, I hope this is a very powerful ally to see through all the bullshit going on, right? So I really hope you're well, and if you need help, I'm here, I'm up for it. Let's see where we can go, guys, all right? So take care. I hope this is empowering, and like I said, I've got a lot of videos brewing. I might release them at different times and just get onto it, because there's a lot of topics that I haven't gone back into yet, and stuff I want to offer as well, right? So thank you for being here. I hope you get a lot from this. Until next time, keep being epic, guys. Keep rocking it, and let's see where we can go. All right. Take care. All the best. Lots of love, and bye for now.
In December, heading for the city lights, 975. We sharing each other, mirrors and father, scent of lemon drips from your eyes. We are the people that rule the world. Rejoicing in the world, take me now. We can
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.